All right, Cathie Wood is talking, and she's got some more stuff to say. Let's get into it right now. Cathie Wood actually quoted Meet Kevin. Boom. Let's get into this and let's discuss what's going on. So, Meet Kevin says, Elon Musk on why we have inflation. He was at the Olin Summit where Elon was speaking. The obvious reason for inflation is that the government printed a zillion more dollars than it has. Velocity of money held constant. This is not like super complicated. Okay? Meet Kevin tweets that. Cathie quotes him, and I just want to give a shout out to Meet Kevin because he's been talking about Cathie forever, and I don't think Cathie's ever like truly acknowledged him. This is the first time she's acknowledged him, which is awesome. That's super great. That's how I feel one time when Meet Kevin tweeted me. I was like, oh my god, he tweeted me. Okay, anyway, important debate. In the last 2 days, Walmart and Target reported that nominal sales increased 3 to 4% on a year-over-year basis during the quarter ended April, translating into a 3 to 4% year-over-year decline in unit sales adjusted for inflation. Their inventories are exploding. Walmart's inventories increased 33% in nominal terms on a year-over-year basis, translating to 20 to 25% in real unit terms, as Target's inventories increased by 42%. In my 45 years in business, I have never seen such inventory excesses. Now, why is this important before we keep getting into this? If inventories are going up, that means people aren't buying as much product, as much stuff. So if Walmart has a bunch more TVs, that means people aren't buying that many TVs. Why is that a good thing? Well, if people aren't buying that many TVs, and over the past 2 years, what we've seen is so much panic over the pandemic, and justifiably so in some respects, that people started buying a lot of stuff. This is why at one point we were like, is there even going to be toilet paper? Because everyone wanted to hoard it for themselves. It's why Amazon exploded as a stock, because everyone was ordering so much stuff off Amazon. It's why grocery companies and stocks like Uber Eats and Postmates, they started taking off, because so many people didn't want to go out into the real world, but they wanted to get those material items. Well, when that happens and you have lockdowns around the world, and companies can't do business, that means you have supply chain shortages. The inventories will decrease because companies can't make them fast enough to keep up with the demand, which means basic economics is if the supply of something is low and the demand of something is high, there's going to be more prices paid for that supply, which is naturally going to lead to more inflation, along with the Fed pumping a ton of money and liquidity into the M2 supply. So if that's the case, then that's bad for inflation. The only way to stop that is for consumer demand to go down, for people to stop buying things, for companies to have more breathing room for supply chains to be able to make all those products, to stock those shelves, so that when consumers come in, it's not 17 people want one laptop. It's, 17 people have 50 different laptops they can choose from, which keeps the prices of laptops low. So she says, U.S. consumer sentiment, as measured by the University of Michigan, the best measure in my experience, has plunged to levels not seen since the 2008-09 global financial crisis. Consumers are rebelling against their loss of purchasing power, meaning they do not want to buy more things, right? Because the consumer sentiment has plunged lower, they are rebelling against these. Rebelling essentially is like, if I was going to buy that water bottle because I wanted it, and now it's $3 more expensive, I'm like, there's no way I'm buying that water bottle. You're just not going to buy it. As a result, companies, the free market capitalism, will have more supply of those water bottles, which means the price of the water bottles will go down, and that will lead to less inflation. She says, I believe that after flattening out for the past 2 years, the velocity of money will resume the decline that started in 1997 and accelerated during the coronavirus. The dramatic decline in consumer sentiment and spending during the last few months corroborates this thinking. Now, that's a very interesting concept right there. The idea that the decline in consumer sentiment and spending is going to ultimately allow the decline of the money velocity to continue. She also follows that now the growth in M2, which is the money supply from the Fed, has declined to low single digits at an annualized rate during the last few months because the Fed has been taking money out of the market. If the velocity of money does decline, then we will be facing the risk of price deflation. Basically saying there's not that much money in the system, and if the velocity of money declines, the way we can actually use that money declines, then we're going to worry about inflation. We're going to have so many inventories and such less consumer demand, we're going to worry about deflation. Now, it's a very controversial thing to put that out there when inflation is still 8.3% and people can't get, people are just so tired of inflation. But it points to her thesis that we're going to talk about in a little bit, because if she's correct about this thesis, her entire deep value stocks, stocks in deep value territory, that first In the Know episode that she did back in December 2021, talking about what's actually going on in the market, or January 2021, she will have been proven to be right, even though it took a little longer for her to be right. Consistent with this line of thinking, credit default swaps, the price of insurance policies against default as measured by the market, are surging. The yield curve is flattening, portending disappointing growth and or lower inflation as stock prices are plummeting. I trust, this is her announcement to the Fed, who's definitely seeing this. I trust that Fed Chair Powell and the Federal Reserve governors and presidents are evaluating more than the short-term supply chain bottlenecks that have been caused by over-ordering and are now showing up Walmart's and Target's record-breaking inventories. Basically saying, hey, Fed, you don't need to raise interest rates because when you do that, you're destroying my growth stocks. And if you just leave interest rates the way they are, because the only reason you're doing that is to curb inflation, well, guess what? Inflation's going to go down because inventories are increasing. I said this back in January. I'm channeling my inner Cathie Wood that, look, this is a supply chain problem. It's supply chain bottlenecks. Once supply chains go away and we stack up inventories, consumer demand will go down because they're not going to be so worried that they need to get the new laptop because they know there's going to be more laptops in place, which means they don't have to rush to buy it, which means prices will go down, inflation will go down, and naturally, we won't have to raise interest rates because you only raise interest rates to curb inflation because you're trying to curb demand. Well, if consumer sentiment is going down, demand is going down, you don't need to artificially try to make it go down by raising interest rates, which obviously hurts growth stocks and compresses those valuations for those growth stocks, which are the stocks that Cathie Wood owns. Now, what was Kevin's response? He says, it's an honor to have my quote quoted by Cathie Wood. Also neat that I was reading this terminal this morning and found myself reading my own name. P.S. I agree with Cathie on inventory. She's going to end up being correct, and everyone will look back in 3 years and say, "Damn." So, so in the terminal, Bloomberg terminal, they quoted Cathie Wood quoting Meet Kevin, which was interesting. Pretty cool moment. So at the end of the day, Meet Kevin is also agreeing with Cathie Wood as well, because he thinks that if inventories are going to go down, inventories are going to go up and consumer sentiment is going to go down, then that means there's not going to be a need to have these crazy high interest rates because inflation is going to go down. Now, will she be correct? I don't know. We're going to see. I mean, interest rates have to go down, or inflation rates have to go down in order for her to be right about this thesis. And if she is right that inflation is going to go down because inventories are going to be up, then she'll have been right. So the next thing she said was a little bit more interesting. Brett Winton, one of her analysis, said, "You are distracted by noise. Over the past 2 months, the estimated time to artificial general intelligence has fallen by between 60 to 70%. Find me a chart that's more macroeconomically meaningful than this one. I will wait." Now, what is AGI? It's not just AI, it's AGI. AGI is the ability to intelligently understand or learn any intellectual task that a human being can. It is the primary goal of some artificial intelligence research and common topic in science fiction and future studies. The reason it's in science fiction and future studies is because it is insane to believe that we could have a sentient robot, meaning a robot that can interpret everything about the world in a artificially intelligent way, but it's artificial general intelligence. It's at levels of AI that we've never seen before, primarily because there's so many neural networks and models and all this data that is being integrated into an AI-based sentient bot or program, whatever it may be called, to the point where they can actually develop a consciousness, which is not a real consciousness, but I mean, if a Tesla can self-drive itself almost better than a human in the next 4 or 5 years, that is what we call a sentient being, right? That would be a literal brain in that car that has never existed before. So ARK is betting, based on this Meta-Cullis prediction, and they're a think tank for AI as well, that the time that it's going to take for AI and AGI to become a thing is falling, I think, almost in half every 2 years, which means if it's falling that exponentially, and this is the research that they did about Wright's Law in terms of understanding batteries and electric vehicles and all this stuff back in 2016, that's how they created their thesis around Tesla, and they ended up winning big on that. If they're right on this, then AGI is going to be a big thing. Now, the thing that Cathie says is really interesting. She says, ARK Invest must share more of our research about AGI and how it is likely to transform the way the world works. Within 6 to 12 years, breakthroughs in AGI could accelerate growth in GDP from 3 to 5% per year to 30 to 50% per year. That's the part that was a bit interesting. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments. The US GDP right now, I forgot I was going to show this, is $20 trillion right now. The GDP of the world, as per like 2013, was like 73 trillion. I can get the more updated numbers, but we're in the many, many, many trillions. For that to increase 30 to 50% year over year, either it's like, okay, what is this woman telling me? Like, what is she like selling me? Or is she actually right about this research? And is there going to be so much innovation, so many things that are unlocked by artificial general intelligence, so many different modular ways in which it can improve our lives, either from a self-driving car to us not having to, I don't know, take notes anymore, for us not having to, go to work because these things are doing it for themselves. So we have more creative endeavors, and that unlocks opportunities. There's a lot of possibilities, but to assume within the next decade, the $20 trillion GDP we have is going to increase 30% year over year. It's hard to believe that. Now, granted, maybe there is some crazy innovation. It was hard to believe we would ever go to Mars. Maybe we're going to do that, but it's just taking it at face value. It's a little bit difficult to understand what the argument is here, especially because there's nothing really specific. There's just saying that AGI is going to get better. It's like, all right, but what are the use cases of that, right? Like, how are we actually going to implement that in our lives to get this 30% year-over-year growth of exponential GDP growth? Like, I don't know. At some level, it's like that's stuff like that. When she says that, I'm like, I don't fully get what you're saying. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about her comments on inventories and supply chains and inflation and on AGI? Thank you guys so much for watching. Looking forward to reading the comments. I'll see you in the next one.